The King of the Battlefield Chapter 21. Chapter 21, Blood Red Tower, 3. TL by Yoni. Edited by Yoni and Mayani. He had killed them all. 25 days had passed since he had been summoned to this strange world. Just a few days ago, there were about 4 people who had survived. But even those few survivors were killed by him 2 days ago. I killed them all. Tang Shalii grinned. Just thinking of the expressions people made just before they died were enough to make him stiff. The loud cries and pleas of his victims. The pitiful look in their eyes excited him. Since he acted as secretly as he could, no one knew that Tang Shalii was the murderer, even in their last moment. When there were only 4 people left, it was a bit difficult as people had their doubts, but even that was amusing in its own way. Either way, they all died at the end. More. I can kill more. With glittering eyes, he licked his dagger. He could still remember the thrill he felt when he found out that there were others inside the tower. A tower full of murderers, just when he was feeling sad that there wasn't anyone else left to kill. He was like a fish in water. This was truly the place where he was meant to be. No one can stop me. Was it at the time when he had killed 10 people? The rare class, slaughterer, he received then, suited him perfectly. It was like a perfect gift God had prepared for him to kill other humans. Slaughterer allowed him to enhance all abilities by 3 when he faced other humans. So he knew that when he faced other humans, he had the confidence that he will not lose to anyone. No, it was impossible for him to lose. On Earth, he was just one of billions of Chinese. However, things were now different. The Reaper who brought death upon humans. The Reaper of Death. Thump. Thump. At that moment, he could hear footsteps nearby. Like a person who found something delicious to eat, Tang Shalii ran across the hall, drooling hungrily. Kwa ha ha ha. Be my first victim. The opponent was a man. A dark-haired man with a long sword in his hand. The weapon seemed quite decent, just in time. He was going to kill him and take his weapon. That's what he thought when he approached him and stabbed his body with his dagger. Crunch. Tumble. Tang Shalii realized his vision was lowering very rapidly. It was strange. The man was expressionless. The dagger didn't even reach him in the first place. Ah! Only then did Tang Shalii see the face of the Reaper who stood behind the man. The real Reaper who sentenced deaths, a number incomparable to himself, stood there. That person is real. The wailing of thousands of souls. It was the last thing Tang Shalii heard before he died. Muiyong climbed the tower. The tower had a total of 5 floors. The first floor was very large and it had too many ways that led up that it was inconvenient to search for all of them. And it wasn't like he had the time. It was the message that appeared the moment he killed the Chinese man who was running towards him. It told him the number of people who entered the tower. However, the number was quickly decreasing. Nearly 1 person was dying every 10 seconds. 200 people among them. It wasn't going to be easy. Even Ben the Slayer had to work with 10 people to help each other out to get 200 kills each and for him to get the lunatic sovereign's ring. He had heard that they used 9 people to lure the prey, which Ben would then kill. So it was very time-consuming for someone to find and kill 200 people on their own. However, Muiyong did not mind it. Muiyong was an assassin. He had successfully assassinated people better than anyone else. It was his specialty was to sense people nearby and to sneak up on them. Even the slightest tremor in the air, or a small vibration. If he didn't pass up even the smallest trace, he believed he could kill 200 people within 5 days. Muiyong closed his eyes. Soon, not far from where he was able to detect his next prey. Please help me. A man and a woman were running away. They were sweating profusely as murderers were chasing them down. Even if they screamed, no one was willing to help them. From behind, they could only sense the people coming to kill them. "Oh, Appa, I'm tired. No. We can't stop now. How did this happen? If we didn't kill those people back then. Cut the crap. Then should we have just let them do as they please? They deserved their deaths." The man and the woman were lovers. They were summoned together and had been barely able to survive until now. However, her beauty was the problem. Late at night, 2 men tried to rape her, but before they could succeed, the man found them and killed one of the 2 men with a rock. And the other man was killed by the woman. As a result, the 2 were branded as murderers and were banished into the tower. If anything was unfair, it was the situation. But, it wasn't like these murderers were willing to listen. Leave me behind, they are after me. If we go on like this, we will both die." The woman realized that she was holding him back. However, the man could still remember the look on those crazy murder-driven bastards, how they smacked their lips when they saw her face. His face crunched up. "I told you not to say things like that. Then just die? You want to just die? If you're exhausted, then just get on my back. We can still run away." There was no time to waste. Even at that moment, they could hear many footsteps approaching them. The woman bit her lips and got on his back. The speed was a bit slow, but they had no other choice. At that moment, clash! Gah! Mo, monster! A scream echoed behind them. "Appa, this sound is..." It was the sound of the people who tried to kill the couple. It couldn't have been a mistake. Someone must be fighting them. Shouldn't we go back and help? The woman cautiously made an opinion. If someone was really helping them, then it might be better to help the person. But, there was also the danger that they might still get tracked down if the murderers won. The man pondered for a moment and nodded his head. He felt that they had a better chance on surviving if they combined their strength with that person to fight against them. And besides, it was human nature to help a person who was in danger. They turned their footsteps. And, in a moment, the couple were able to witness a scene that was hard to believe. Save me. Please. My arm, my arm. The murderers were a group of 7. Just a single man was fighting against them. As there was a saying that all things yield to numbers, a minority couldn't win against the majority. However, no common sense worked for him. He was strong. In an instant, he finished off all 7 of the murderers. Afterwards, he looked at the 2 couple. Gulp! The bodies with their arms and legs cut off were lined on the floor. At the moment when their eyes met, the 2 were unable to move. They had met a countless number of people, but they had never seen a man with that kind of aura. The man next to the woman tried to sweep his fears away and started to talk. Are you okay? Why didn't you just run away? We came to help you." It wasn't like they were lying. They didn't realize how the man knew that they were running away from the murderers. Eventually, Myung, scrunched up his eyes. Affection could only be given by the strong. It was a truth they should have realized by surviving the 25 days. The affection spared on the weak could make the situation worse. Also, seeing the conditions of the couple, it didn't seem like they could last the 5 days. The woman had sprained her foot, and even if the man tried not to show it, his face was blue as if his internal organs were twisted. They probably had entered the tower because they killed someone, but in here, there were a lot of crazy people, craving to kill. If they were caught by them, they would experience all sorts of terrors before they die. To meet Myung at that moment, it was hard to say if they were lucky or unlucky. Kill everyone. It was the reason why he decided not to wear a mask. He thought there was no need for it as he was going to kill everyone he faced. At least in this tower, he planned to be a reaper who brought forth death. That meant that he was not willing to go back on his thoughts. Swish! Anguish screamed. Myung gave off an icy cold expression. You could find a map of the tower with the status viewer. And on the map, Muyoung's location appeared as a red dot. About now, everyone would have received a similar warning message. I can't just run around blindly. A normal person would try to avoid where a red dot appeared. After 24 hours had passed since he had first entered the tower, a new message appeared. A bleak smile appeared on Muyoung. The tower had a total of 5 floors. Every day, a floor will be filled with water and closed off. If you didn't want to drown, you had to climb up to the next floor. Even if Muyoung's location was exposed by the red dot, even if someone wanted to avoid him, there were sections where there were no other escape routes. The entrances leading to the 3rd floor. There were 2 entrances that led to the 3rd floor from the 2nd. And Muyoung was planning on blocking one of the 2 entrances. The other entrance would be clear, but it still won't be easy to pass by. Skeleton of Fire and Ice. Muyoung took out a talisman. And as he shook it like he was shaking off some dust, the skeleton of fire and ice appeared. Crack! Crack! The skeleton rattled as its bones creaked. Muyoung pointed towards an entrance that was about 5 m wide and quietly spoke. Kill everyone who passes by. 2 entrances. And one of the 2 was blocked by the skeleton of fire and ice. People needed to make a choice. To face Muyoung or to face the skeleton. Or to die from drowning. Whatever choice they made, it would not be an easy decision to make. Now, I just need to wait. Like a fisher who waits patiently after casting his line. Chapter 22, Blood Red Tower, 4. TL by Yoni. Edited by Mayanai and Yoni. As he stood with his arms crossed, he waited for people to walk by the entrance. Prey started to flood in sooner than he anticipated. Even if he was identified as a slayer and his location was exposed by the red dot, not everyone tried to avoid him. I came hoping to see how strong the so-called slayer is, but aren't you just a weakling? Foolish people wanted to prove their strength. There were quite a few people who came, curious to see the face of the slayer. And curiosity killed the cat. Slice. He cleanly cut out the wrist of a muscular man who was holding a sword. In an instant, as blood gushed out, he grabbed hold of his wrist and screamed out loud. Gaya! This bastard! And as his eyes met Muyoung's cold eyes, he quickly quieted down. He couldn't move either of his feet. It was similar to when you face a lion and your feet get all tied up. No, I said it wrong. Friend, yes? Give me just one. Gug. Anguish, which squeezed into his organs, started to suck out all the blood. Shortly, the man dried up like a mummy and dropped on the floor. Like him, there were others who disregarded Muyoung's first impression and fought against him. Usually, these types of people didn't even last a minute or changed their words after one of their body parts was cut off. In front of Muyoung, corpses were piling up neatly. As the smell of blood overpowered the surroundings and thick blood was splattered all over the floor, Muyoung cut up the corpses into smaller parts, as best and as cruel he could, and arranged them in front of the entrance. Warning and division. Even Muyoung, himself, would be no match if dozens of men started to force their way in. Although he was certain he was the strongest within the tower, it was only in a one-on-one scenario. Although a strong person being able to overwhelm a 100 people was the reality in the underworld, he was not at that level. Muyoung coldly recognized the reality. Overconfidence was poison and was the main culprit for destroying oneself. Against monsters, he would transform into a beast to slaughter them. However, against humans, who knew how to think, he would have to use that to his advantage. The people who see these corpses would think they would not be able to tread further by themselves. So they would try to gather together, but would it be that simple? If I kill 5 people, I can leave. It was one of the conditions to leave the tower. It was the easiest condition to make people stricken with fear to divide. Unless someone who possessed an unrivaled charisma dropped down like a comet, it was certain they were going to divide. It would be the same at the other entrance. And because the skeleton of fire and ice was not human, they would get a taste the most primitive feelings of fear. Within these people, there will be some who would try to force their way through. Although humans were rational, if they lost that rationality, they will act recklessly. Then, Myung closed his eyes as he leaned against the wall of the entrance. It was to know if someone approached him. Either way, it was a battle against the time from now. 36 hours had passed since they had entered the tower. The same message appeared in front of everyone's eyes. The Slayer was blocking the two entrances. It didn't take long for everyone to realize that it meant that all the courageous people have been killed and that they needed to kill that Slayer to pass through the entrance. We need to stick together to live. One deadly strong opponent. It gave people a reason to group up. If someone with a special trait appeared, it was obvious they were going to group around him. And Colin was one of the people who had a special trait. A prince. It was a unique class, but he was also the Prince of England before he was summoned. At most, he could confer knighthood upon 30 people at most and, depending on their conferred knighthood, their abilities will be strengthened. Loyalty was just an extra benefit. If the majority became his enemy, he would die. This penalty existed, but even with it, it was definitely an attractive class. Usually, the greater the class, a greater penalty existed. And Colin entered the tower with 10 loyal subordinates. However, the Slayer was strong. Even if he didn't face him face to face, he knew how strong he was. It was logically impossible for him to kill 100 people by himself. Colin, who believed that even 10 wasn't enough, decided to increase his numbers a bit more. I will not kill you guys. Instead, work with me. Colin spoke to a group of 5 collapsed on the floor. Out of the 5, the one who seemed to be their leader spat at Colin's face. Puh! What kind of crap are you trying to pull? These bastards! You're all desperate to die, aren't you? A man beside Colin, who was wearing a full plate of armor, walked out. While holding a sword, he tried to cut off their necks, but Colin stopped him. Sir Swin, I'm fine. However, Prince. These rude bastards. Punch. Colin's fist smacked the chest of the man named Swin. Even though Swin was wearing a full plate of armor, the armor caved in as he flew back. Cough. As Swin coughed up blood, Colin spoke. Sir Swin, I told you I was fine. I'm sorry. Swin's face was filled with fear. Even besides the unique class, Colin knew how and when to use his power properly to put others under his control. It could be said that he was born with the ability to rule over others. Therefore, in reality, the penalty was non-existent for him, as it was unlikely for more than half of his followers to betray him. The 5 who witnessed his strength only gulped their saliva. And then, Colin resumed negotiations, smiling as he pressured them. Work with me. If you do, you will be able to enjoy all the glory. First, it was just one person. Myung sliced a man who was wildly running towards him. Next, 2 people came at him. Afterwards, 5. By then, Myung noticed what they were up to. Someone is testing me. Who was this person? Myung was very interested. A man with considerable leadership had appeared. He had been rallying up people and cornering them into a deadly situation. Only to measure Myung's strength. He could slowly feel the killing intent of the person who would try to kill him after measuring his strength. Their abilities were strengthened. I wonder if they have a priest class. And those who attacked Myung were all consistently strong. Of course, even if he said strong, it was all the same to him. However, they were still above average. He was certain after seeing how they were unfamiliar with their own strength and were just randomly swinging their weapons. If they were a complete party with a priest class, Myung might have fought a bit seriously. But, Myung only made a small smile. It was like something was tickling him. It was similar to the feeling he had when he was appointed with a difficult mission. The habit he gained while living as an assassin for the longest time didn't disappear. It wasn't the type of habit he could fix if he wanted to. Then, it was unlikely for the person to appear unless he was certain of Myung's strength. If he had a brain, it was more than likely for him to just watch from afar. Myung couldn't approach him. Since he became a slayer, a warning will sound on the status viewer if he was to approach him. If he did, the enemy would hide even deeper. Push. After Myung had killed 7 people, the last person to survive had stabbed Myung through his abdomen. Ah, ah! Clink! As if the man who stabbed Myung couldn't believe it himself, he cried out a weird sound, dropped his sword as he ran away without looking back. Just after the man disappeared from his sight, Myung pulled out the sword from his abdomen. My organs aren't damaged. He purposely got stabbed with the sword. He moved so that the sword would pass by all his organs. He couldn't do anything about the blood that was spilling out, but there were lots of dead bodies nearby. Gulp! Gulp! As Myung thrust anguish in a corpse, it started to absorb the blood. His wound was healing at a noticeable pace. Now, what are you going to do? Myung looked towards the direction the man ran. Since he asked the question, a reply will come soon. It wouldn't be weird if the man decided to make a full frontal attack against Myung after learning that Myung was injured. He knew that the battle would be tough if the numbers were great. However, Myung gathered all the scattered corpses. Alone, but not truly. Lord class. Death Lord. That was right. He could just make allies. Soldiers of death who would never betray him and were willing to fight with all they had for Myung. Chapter 23, Blood Red Tower, 5. TL by Yoni. Edited by Yoni and Mayani. Stamina was consumed to create undead. However, that was only when he made an effort in creating undead. As the skill rank increased, his expenditure of stamina decreased slightly. However, Myung only focused on creating the corpses into undead as they were. He didn't care by what % their original abilities decreased. The unknown was horrifying. In this world, not being knowledgeable enough was really a crime. Even if the people who entered the tower survived the 25 days, fighting different monsters, they lacked knowledge of the undead. As they didn't know how to face them, it wouldn't be easy for them to come out alive. That was why some of the undead were roaming around the tower looking for food. What, you? Didn't you die? As Colin's comrade, who was sent to the Slayer, returned, people came up to greet him. People gathered around their comrade who was limping towards them and each spoke. Why isn't this bastard replying? Leave him alone, he seems severely injured. They really didn't have the slightest doubt. They didn't notice the unique smell of his body or anything strange about his appearance. It was because they had never experienced it. The fear of undead. The horror of having your once comrade biting your neck. Crunch. Gaia. Is this kid crazy? Yo, get away from him. As the zombie bit the person closest to him, 3 people tried to help, but it was no use. The lowest level among the undead, the zombie's only useful weapon was the strong biting strength of his jaws. Unless someone ripped apart his jaws, he would never let go of his prey. Only when the zombie decided to let go, did the man drop down on the ground with blood gushing out from his bitten neck. Gore. As the zombie made a half-gurgling sound, as if he was mocking them, all 3 of them grabbed hold of their weapons. Swing! It's a monster. It's not human. Only then did they grasp the magnitude of the problem. Afterwards, the fight was dull. Until they realized that the zombie's weakness was his head, they continuously poked through its body until its body was a beehive. Ha, ha! Fucking monster! Even when the zombie completely stopped moving, they kept kicking the corpse to vent their anger. Although they thought it was over, they didn't realize this was, in fact, the most dangerous moment. Grab! Gaia! The man who was bitten by the zombie to death had come back alive. Muyoung shook his head. 131 people. Muyoung's record increased even when the undead killed humans. After he had reached third place for killing over 90 people, it seemed he had reached a new record. If Muyoung could remember correctly, the top score was made by Ben the Slaughterer, but the time period was different. Ben the Slaughterer hasn't been summoned yet. He needed to wait 3 more years for Ben, who received the Lunatic Sovereign's Ring by killing more than 200 people, to be summoned. However, as Muyoung had already reached the top score, he was planning to continue increasing his kill count. Therefore, Ben the Slaughterer will probably not be able to set a new record. The reward will be given once he left the tower. Even if there weren't any extra messages, he didn't mind. Wang Chunglin. However, he couldn't help but frown as that name appeared in the records. Wang Chunglin. It was the real name of the chief who led the Forest of Death. Out of hundreds of assassins, Muyoung was the only one who knew the real name of the chief. He was truly a shadow as he existed in the boundaries of this world. If Muyoung didn't break through his brainwashing, he wouldn't have known the chief's real name in his lifetime. Crunch. From the current list of people Muyoung had to kill, Wang Chunglin was, of course, his top priority. Even now, he will be growing the Forest of Death as the people he had killed with his hands were unable to rest in peace and were in infinite pain. Like Muyoung in the past, there will be a continuous rise of people who are kidnapped and forced to perform these hell-like duties. Wait for me. For now, it wasn't the right time. Muyoung was only given one chance. He wasn't as easygoing as to think he would be given another chance to return to the past. As his memories were clear, there was no way for Wang Chunglin to avoid death. Muyoung calmed his rage. In an instant, his breathing returned to normal and his heartbeat became regular. It wasn't like he could fulfill his revenge right away. Instead, he needed to focus on getting the Lunatic Sovereign's Ring. Zombies have a high chance of infecting their prey. He couldn't say that the zombies themselves were strong. The time they could move was short and they rotted fast if they didn't continue to consume humans. However, because of their contagiousness, people needed to be alert. But those who were unaware of the undead were just good prey. The zombies were continuously increasing in numbers. Colin, that bitch. He used us knowing we were gonna die. To the 3rd floor. It's impossible on the 2nd floor. The status viewer is ringing. The other entrance is being blocked by a skeleton. And the bastard called Slayer has a serious injury. We have a chance. Muyoung could sense 5 people fairly close by. The challengers approached, knowing that Muyoung the Slayer was at that location. They seemed to have made a detour after seeing the skeleton of fire and ice in front of the other entrance. They are starting to split up. He could sense that the group, that was gathering people, had started to break apart. And also that the person in the middle of all this was a man called Colin. His comrades who were killed by Muyoung would come back alive as undead only attack them. It seemed impossible for Colin to gain the trust of the people. It was like Muyoung had planned. He just quietly unsheathed Anguish. Was it a safety measure? The alert level about Muyoung would change in intervals of 50 kills. And as he reached 150 people, he was recognized as the boss. As if it didn't want Muyoung to kill any more. However, the number of people who came to the entrance to kill Muyoung had decreased over time. It couldn't be helped. There was no way that people would come crawling to a place if they knew it meant their deaths. It was because they all entered the tower to hunt, not to be hunted. Muyoung waited patiently. They didn't like the zombies, Muyoung, or the skeleton of fire and ice. Then he wondered, what kind of decision will people make? Escape. By killing 5 people they could leave the tower. It was an absolute proposition and their only way out. As people gathered, their selfishness tended to grow stronger. For now, they will group up because of Colin, but it was only a matter of time. I should start moving. There was no point in blocking the entrance any further. Colin would most likely try to leave the place to save himself or to arrange an all-out attack on Myung since he was now recognized as the boss. It was foolish to just continue blocking an entrance. Zombies were now scattered all around the second floor and, through them, he was able to figure out the location of the people. Myung just had to move. Their confusion will only increase if they hear that the Slayer had started to hunt. The decisions and the fates of those who were cornered were already decided. Beep beep. An alert sounded from the status viewer. The red dot on the map was moving quickly. The movements of the Slayer, who used to only guard the entrance, made people nervous. Gaia. People who faced the red dot were surely killed. The people who were still alive could only hear dying screams of the victims. People were frightened out of their senses. The combination of zombies and the Slayer were enough for them to lose their souls. Stab. In the end, someone had made a drastic decision. Cough. You. I'm sorry. If I just kill you, I will have 5 kills. I don't want to die. They gathered because of Colin, but their priority was to survive. A bright light wrapped around the body of the man who stabbed his own comrade. And as if it was a lie, the man's body soon disappeared. The people who watched the scene felt as if the line they were holding on to broke free. The first time was always hard, but, afterwards, it would progressively get easier. Beep beep beep. Even so, the red dot kept moving. Die. Ah. The robust group made up of tens of people could only be shaken by the fear of death. But, there was something he couldn't understand at all. They clearly said that the Slayer was severely injured. That he was stabbed with a sword and his blood was gushing out. However, the Slayer didn't even care about the zombies and kept moving. By him, a lot of people had died. There was only one thought that came up on everyone's mind. Is he a monster? A thought that it might be possible for him to not be human. A suspicion that he might even be controlling the zombies himself. Who the hell is the Slayer? Finally, someone screamed out. It was obvious. The person who told everyone that the Slayer was injured had ended up having a convulsive death. The messages that popped in front of the people were the only way for them to learn about the Slayer. The words that stated how many people he had killed. In the end, no one knew if he was a human or a monster. No one. Chapter 24, Blood Red Tower, 6. TL by Yoni. Edited by Yoni and Mayani. Anguish was soaked in blood. Because of the endless amount of blood, it was unable to absorb all of it. Drib. Drib. The blood ran down the edge of the sword and dripped on the floor. However, a puddle of blood was already forming on the ground. Myung's appearance was that of a vampire. As if he craved for blood, he instantly assassinated 5 more people. These 5 sheep who were stricken with fear and weren't able to cooperate with each other were unable to do anything against the wolf. This has to be a dream. Myung wielded his sword at a man who fell to the floor who had lost the will to even run away. Slash. Swish. Naturally, Anguish was sheathed once again. It wasn't satisfied in labeling Myung as the boss and had to go and give everyone else a blessing. As if it was trying to balance it out. Myung could understand why Ben the Slaughterer stopped his massacre after 200 kills. He probably got scared. He valued his life. The toughness blessing protected the person from the effects of spells and curses and also negated negative emotions, like fear. When fear disappeared, a prey is no longer simply a prey. If they combined their strengths and used their now clear-headed minds, the hunter might be the one to get bitten. I've now fulfilled the condition to receive the Lunatic Sovereign's ring. Normally, a person would usually stop after reaching their goal. Myung's ultimate goal in entering the tower was to receive the Lunatic Sovereign's ring and he had already achieved it. If he continued to progress, he didn't know what they would try to do in an attempt to kill the Slayer. But Myung was interested. If there wasn't a condition for the Slayer to be at a disadvantage, he would have stopped by now. He didn't particularly enjoy pointless bloodbaths. However, after every 50 kills, Muyong's situation also changed disadvantageously. Was it simply just to make it balanced? Or because they didn't want the Slayer to kill everyone inside the tower? No way. The tower or the underworld were both not all that friendly of a place. As the conditions get harder, the rewards will also become better. An immutable law. In this world, a person was rewarded by overcoming hardship. The problem was most would die in the process, but it was still worth a try. Even if Muyong returned with his memories intact, there was no way to ensure a victory against the demons by following a fixed path. Muyong looked towards the survivors. 257 people. There was enough prey. This is impossible. Colin wasn't able to come back to his senses. The current situation was way beyond what he had imagined. Truly, something impossible had occurred. I'm going to die. The people he had appointed knighthood had turned their backs and started to escape. The people he tried hard to gather, half had scattered or were dead, and of the 10 people who followed Colin before he had even entered the tower, 3 had already escaped. It was the worst situation. Death was slowly approaching. As Colin had always been a winner his entire life, losing was something Colin was unfamiliar with. Born as the Prince of England, he always reigned over numerous amounts of people. However, no amount of authority worked on his enemy. Die by the condition of his class or die in the hands of the Slayer. But, how was he to contend against a monster if he couldn't even step on his shadow? Escape. It was easy killing 5 men. It was a decision a ruler should never make. Colin was seriously considering an option he has never made in his life. At the moment he was licking his lips nervously. Swish! The wind blew. At the same time, he felt as though something was covering his body. His thumping heartbeat slowly calmed back down to normal. His brain, which was solely fixed on fear, started to function again. What do you want to do? As the man who was wearing a leather armor and holding a mace asked, Colin spoke. Lord Alberts, the man is cleverly avoiding our location. Aren't I right? Yes. The people he had killed so far were the ones who had run away. In other words, it means he fears our gathering of people. Indeed, yes. Gather everyone. Now, we will commence hunting. They were taken back for a moment due to the appearance of zombies and the movements of the Slayer, but they had far greater numbers on their side. About 100 people. Originally, they had about double their current number. Even though he didn't knight everyone, the fact that Colin was able to bring together this many people in a short time proved his ability. It was doable. He just panicked because he had never met anyone who threatened his life. That son of a bitch! How dare he humiliate me like this? Colin couldn't accept the fact that he was frightened for a moment. I will definitely kill you. No matter what happens, I will kill you for sure. Clench. Colin ground his teeth as he projected his murderous intent towards where the Slayer might be located. Zombies were quickly decreasing in numbers. People, who were blessed with toughness, had their fear reduced to a certain degree and started to fight back. Gather. If he left them alone, they would only be defeated by the enemy one by one. All the 30-some-odd zombies who used to roam around the second floor started to gather towards Muyong. By this process, Muyong was able to notice that Colin was the man behind the hunt. The widespread arrangement of people started to move in around Muyong. Not a bad decision. It seemed like his stiff brain was working better. However, it wasn't like Muyong would let them do as they pleased after knowing their intentions. Using the talisman, Muyong recalled the skeleton of fire and ice. It was possible to summon it wherever he was if he had the talisman. Crack! Crack! The skeleton of fire and ice was covered in thick layers of blood. Since it had killed tens of people who tried to pass through the entrance, it seemed natural that traces were left. But at that moment, clank! Zombies started to eat each other. In a blink of an eye, the total number of zombies had decreased to 15. Eventually, the bodies of the 15 zombies that ate off another were inflated. Their skins also changed to green. Sharp fingernails and teeth were created and they contained a strong corpse poison. Watching the whole process, Muyong pondered for a moment. Did my skill ranking increase because the number of kills from the skeleton of fire and ice added up to my score? Muyong didn't do much after he entered the tower. All he did was make zombies and slay people. It seemed like the two actions he made had helped him raise his rank. Death and art, it seemed as though their fields were divided. Muyong just looked at the newly created ghouls. They were about 1.5 times bigger than the size of a normal zombie and their abilities have greatly improved. Sorry about this. Ghouls were incomparable to zombies. If there were 10 zombies, they may be somewhat comparable. If zombies were just mindless moving corpses, ghouls had an understanding of combat. Especially their poison imbued in their nails and teeth were strong enough to kill even an elephant. Unintentionally, an enormous fighting potential was handed to him. All of Colin's efforts and plans were put to shame. If it's like this, then even a single breakthrough isn't necessary. Originally, he was planning on making a single pathway and killing them off slowly. But, with 15 ghouls, it didn't seem necessary. Follow me. Jeek. Kwaeaok. As Muyong moved forward, the skeleton of ice and fire and the ghouls followed behind. Clash. Muyong parried a mace that was flying towards him. The man who lost his weapon ran towards him without a weapon. Gah! Anguish cleanly sliced through the man's chest. An exquisite work where even the bones were cleanly cut. The man fell to the floor. Right after, a man wearing a full-plated armor blocked him with a long sword. Thump. However, the speed was awful. After Muyong tripped him over, the man lost his balance and Muyong took the chance to stab through the slight gap in between the man's plated armor. Swish! As Muyong took back Anguish, which had accurately pierced through his sides, with a loud sound of a crack, the man's waist snapped. Muyong continued to walk as he sliced through people who were in his way. No one could stop Muyong from moving forward. If they attacked all at once, it might have been different, but the ghouls were already taking care of the surrounding situation. And the person, who was trying to kill Muyong, was a man being protected in a safe area. Colin. At a first sight, Muyong could tell it was him. That this was the man who was responsible for gathering up all the people and testing him up until now. As Muyong stood right in front of him, Colin grabbed a thin long sword. Lord Alberts, Sir Swin. As he stood there and called out the names of his dead comrades, he felt enraged. You, I am going to kill you for sure. Did he feel companionship with those who were dead? But, he was flimsy. Like a flowing stream of water, Muyong naturally dodged the long sword. As if he trained his skills well, compared to the few who fought earlier, he had much more sophisticated skills. But, he didn't have too much real-life experience. On the other hand, Muyong had more real-life experience than anyone else. As Muyong moved much deeper than the length of the long sword, he swung Anguish without the slightest hesitation. Slash. Chapter 25, Blood Red Tower, End. TL by Yoni. Edited by Yoni and Mayani. The number of survivors quickly decreased. As Colin, the person who had arranged the largest group, had died, without an exception, the majority of the people tried to kill each other to escape. However, there were still a few who decided to stay. The blessing from the tower allowed survivors to lose their fears and stick together. At 200 kills, they received a toughness blessing, at 250 kills, they received an iron will blessing, and finally at 300 kills, they received the guardian blessing. Isn't it trying hard? Muyong lightly clicked his tongue after reading the message about the guardian blessing. It was a blessing that could only be used by quite high-ranked priests. A penalty that wasn't really a penalty was created. Either Muyong had to die or everyone else did for this fight to end. Now, he couldn't even give up. Of course, he wasn't planning to. But still, it was going to the extremes. Winner gets all. The last one standing would get everything. Muyoung was already very used to this method. It wasn't originally this kind of an extreme world. He turned around and looked at the ghouls. Meanwhile, the number ghouls have increased to 30. There was something unique about these ghouls, they had a bit of a dark aura mixed into their skin. And in the middle of them, there was a ghoul that was particularly dark. Dark ghoul. The prince and his subjects. As a matter of fact, after making Colin into an undead, he had turned into that creature. An ability to reinforce the 30 ghouls under his supervision had been created when his head was put back together. When Muyoung looked at the dark ghoul created from Colin's corpse, information about it appeared on the status viewer. Level, 56. Type, Ghoul. Strength 65, 60 plus 5, Agility 60, 55 plus 5. Stamina 55, 50 plus 5, Intelligence 44, 39 plus 5. Wisdom 46, 41 plus 5. Plus Dark Aura, the 30 chosen ghouls' stats will increase by 5. Plus Decent Tolerance to Light. Plus Loss of Vision, Superior Sense of Hearing. Even the Dark Ghoul had its stats raised by 5. Since the number in front of the brackets were the finalized values, if he only considered just the basic stats, it was higher than Muyoung. Although stats weren't everything in a battle, it was at least an objective indicator of one's capabilities. I've gained something unexpected. Muyoung never guessed that Colin could be turned into this good of an undead. It meant that Colin had that much of an overwhelming story. Not only that, but since he was recognized as prince and his subjects, not one but many, he could now place the 31 ghouls under one talisman. It was now a question of whether all the blessing given to the rest of the people in the tower to counterbalance Muyoung would be able to stop these undead. Grr. The dark ghoul laid down flat on the floor and pricked up his ears. Although he had lost his vision, he instead gained a greater sense of hearing and was able to catch even the finest details. Geek. Unlike the zombies, the dark ghoul was able to make decisions by himself and soon started to run towards his prey while letting out a horrible shriek. The 30 ghouls followed soon afterwards. Then, Muyoung couldn't just play around. The time had come to end this fight. After 350 kills, no other blessing was given. Maybe it had assumed that no one could massacre more than 300 people? He could only know just how many survivors were left and how many people he had slain. Even then, Muyoung was still calm. To enter the tower, the requirement was that the person had to have murdered someone. Also, most of the people entered to kill another. Even though there were some who entered not because they wanted to, he didn't have the time to take care of them. He couldn't hesitate any longer. It wasn't enough to just step onwards. There were too many strong enemies Muyoung had to face. 396 people. Swish. With a large shake, Muyoung brushed off a large amount of blood on Anguish. No one else had survived. Muyoung walked in between the dead bodies. I'm missing 4 people. For some reason, he felt sad. The numbers didn't exactly fall clean. He thought that like the blessing, the reward might have been decided upon every 50 kills. However, no one was left alive. In sadness, as he sheathed Anguish, letters started to appear and combine. Who almost accomplished. It was definitely different from the last time he earned the Death Lord class. At that time, he had received a special reward instead of an incredible. As expected, was it because he didn't have 400 kills? Since it seemed like he would get a reward every 50 kills and since he had killed 394 people, he thought he was going to get the reward for 350 kills. Muyoung clicked his tongue. He waited for the reward, but then a story he never thought of appeared before his eyes. The reward has changed. The impossible that has been almost accomplished has been changed to accomplished. This had never happened in all of his 40 years. Even more, the fact that the Masters of Darkness were responsible for this change in the reward. Besides the Death Lord, they were names unfamiliar to him. The Masters of the Darkness, who couldn't become gods. Solomon had died and instead the laws were left behind. And through the conversation with Merlin, Muyeong knew that those who overlooked the laws were recognized as the Masters of Darkness. However, Merlin didn't even know the specifics about the Masters of Darkness. Possibly because the Masters of Darkness were superior beings to Merlin? Through this opportunity, Muyeong found out how many were part of the Masters. 11 beings. Those who supported were 4 and those who forfeited were 6. And if you added the Death Lord, by simple calculations, there were 11 in total. However, it didn't seem like the Masters of Darkness were simply managers. Even if their identities were in a fog, like how Muyeong was chosen by the Death Lord and was given a class related to him, it was likely that other Masters could also choose someone as well. Death Lord, the Lord class. The undead made by the art of death skill were much stronger than a normal undead. Depending on the rank, it should have a tremendous destructive power than most secret classes. The classes offered by the other 10 masters would probably be the same. While putting a bit of strength in his eyes, he focused on the letters that appeared. Soon after, a red ring, helmet, and cape appeared on top of Muyeong's hand. Swish! Knee! And beside him, a huge horse, about 3 meters tall, jumped out. Its hoofs, tail, and mane were blazing with blue fire. It had dark skin and great big wings like a Pegasus, but Muyeong almost pulled out his sword instinctively, after looking at the creature. A top-ranking monster. Even in the underworld, there weren't many monsters considered to be in the top ranks. Usually, people identified dragons and their mixed bloodlines, giants, hydras, and other creatures as top-ranking monsters. And the hell horse that appeared before Muyeong had the magic power that was comparable to a dragon's. Just by facing the creature made Muyeong's whole body tingle. It became hard for him to breathe and all his pores were dripping with sweat. Even if the monsters that appeared at the temple were strong, they were merely low-ranked. Something like a dark ghoul would barely pass the threshold into the intermediate rankings. But, all of a sudden, a top-ranked monster appeared. If it was someone other than Muyeong, they would have fainted already. The hell horse looked down on Muyeong. Nay. Afterward, it snorted heavily. A top-ranking monster could wipe out a reasonably sized guild or a clan. As of now, even if Muyeong gave it all he had, he would be unable to win against the hell horse. For some reason, he didn't sense any killing intent. Muyeong quickly calmed down. It was one of Muyeong's specialties to adapt to any situation. When the hell horse watched Muyeong instantly return his breathing back to normal, the horse looked surprised as it nickered. I accept. Nay. As if it was telling Muyeong, he had made a good decision, it spread its wings widely. It probably thought it benefited, but Muyeong also did it intentionally. It's enough. The rewards were more than what he had expected to receive in the beginning. It was truly impossible to simply tame a top-ranking monster. Even the Dragon Lord had to overcome tens of life-threatening situations and succeed in 10 consecutive achievements in order to tame the magical dragon. For now, being helped 3 times was more than enough. Just like that, it was the same as a decent guild moving at his command. Depending on how he used them, these 3 opportunities could prove to be an enormous help. And Muyeong was one of the few people who could use these opportunities wisely. I could look around a dangerous area. As for now, Headley Cow was all that was on his mind. A fairy that could transform into any appearance. In the end, it turns into a phoenix. If he could just grab hold of the Headley Cow in that transformed state, he could benefit from it tremendously. Even though he had a long-distance teleportation magical item since it was in a demon god's territory, he didn't know where to start, but with this, he believed he could advance more quickly than before. Besides that, couple memories came back to him regarding where he could use the hell horse. If I beat it before using all my 3 chances, that will do. Also, if Muyeong grew stronger before he used all his chances, that was good enough. Or, figured out a way to win. He had many options. It was just that it took him time. Myung considered taming the hell horse as a definite fact. The gate to the underworld opens in 2 days. He cleared his mind and nodded. The tower appeared on the 25th day. Within just 3 days he was able to overcome the trial and receive a reward greater than what he had imagined. This was enough to enter the underworld in 2 days. It would be enough to be free from the clutches of the Forest of Death and Wang Chunglin. The past will not repeat itself. In the past, he was kidnapped without being able to even resist them. Afterwards, with all the different kinds of drugs and brainwashing, he was turned into an absolute perfect assassin. He lived a meaningless life, like a machine, for 40 years. Once was more than enough. Myung clenched his teeth. Whoosh! Afterwards, a bright light surrounded Myung. Chapter 26, Underworld, 1. TL by Mayanai. Edited by Yoni and Mayanai. A mountain with swirling snow. Tens of white troll corpses were scattered along the side of the mountain. The gruesome scene revealed that these corpses were smashed to pieces. There was a man in between these corpses. Ice trolls were ranked high among the middle-ranked monsters. Tens of these trolls, which most strong fighters wouldn't even fight one alone, were cleaned out solely by the man who sat down and mumbled. Troll King bitch, only good at running away while causing trouble. Troll King. The king of trolls who was incomparable to regular trolls. There were even rumors that he was so gigantic that ogres avoided him. But, this man talked about the Troll King lightly as if he was talking about his neighbor's dog. However, he had two qualifications to do so. The Fighting King Lucien. He was the wild man who was known as the person closest to humanity's top 10. He didn't join a guild or clan and only acted by himself. However, no group attempted to recruit this man. His fighting style was the embodiment of craziness. He wouldn't discriminate between friend or foe and would smash everyone. He was quite a ways apart from being helpful in group battles. Usually, due to his unstable state, he was banned from entering all cities, however that didn't worry him at all as he was originally a wild man living by himself. There are tons of bastards to catch, but this Troll King is being a pain. Ha, fucking bastard! He had come all this way to complete a certain trial. Weeing. Just then, his status viewer rang suddenly. As Lucien wrinkled his forehead to look, renewed information appeared. The record of the tower has been broken. Just like his name, the Fighting King, Lucien has left countless record on Solomon's Hall of Fame. However, there weren't many cases of his records being broken. Of course, even if they were, he didn't care all that much. There were all bastards anyways. However, he couldn't help but widen his eyes when he looked at the renewed record. 400 people? Just what kind of bastard is he? The name that appeared was no name. It meant he purposely hid his name. This happened before not too long ago. He was notified when the killing record at the temple was broken. Even at that time, no name took first place. It was highly likely they were the same person. It's been a long time since I've seen a bastard who seems crazier than me. Lucien knew that he himself wasn't normal. But, this person was even more absurd. Lucien's record was 111 people, but this bastard's record was 400. Even demonstrating his cleverness by cold-heartedly hiding his name. Hiya! Just who was it? His curiosity was aroused. He'll soon go through the gate at the temple and arrive at a great city. Should I go watch? Although there was an important trial, Lucien was a person who would only follow his heart. If he became curious, he had to immediately satisfy it. Even though he was hiding himself, a crazy man would always recognize his kind. Perhaps he would be the only one to find the true identity of that person. Although he was banned from entering great cities. Lucien shrugged his shoulders. He was the Fighting King. He was one of the few who held the title of a king. And there was no one who could block a king's path. Myung wasn't the only one to exit the tower. Flutter. After blowing air out of its mouth, the hell horse broadly spread its wings and flew up to the sky. Myung didn't really care. It would probably loiter around his surroundings while keeping an eye on him. If not, it wouldn't be able to come promptly if Myung was in danger. The lunatic sovereign said, "Hey." Although he was preoccupied with the hell horse, the three equipment he received in the tower were equally important. However, he would have never thought that the lunatic sovereign would be a set. Moreover, he was able to receive all three set pieces in the tower. It seemed like he was rewarded a piece after killing 200, 250 and 300 people. If you gather items that are part of a set, you will receive an effect greater than its rank. Normally, only items used by legendary figures were judged to be a set. It meant that it was that much rarer and harder to find. It was the type of equipment he would have never been able to receive at the temple. As he carefully gazed at the equipment, related information appeared. Name: Lunatic Sovereign's Ring. Rank: A. Classification: Equipment. Durability: 25,000. Effect: all stats +4, when close to death, you will become a lunatic warrior by consuming stamina. Name: Lunatic Sovereign's Helmet. Rank: B++. Classification: Equipment. Durability: 25,000. Effect: all stats +3, stamina +5. Name: Lunatic Sovereign's Cape. Rank: B++. Classification: Equipment. Durability: 25,000. Effect: all stats +3, stamina +5. Asterisk set effect: 3/3 all stats +5, you do not consume stamina as a lunatic warrior. Ha! Myung blinked. Each equipment increased all of his stats. All stats had the very important property of even increasing new created stats. Equipment that had this property were considered to be in the top among their ranks. But, if he was to add the values together, it was an increase of 15. Stamina was even increased by a further 10. This was better than combining a few A-ranked equipment. It was safe to say it was strongest equipment he could receive at the Blue Temple. It seems like this effect was the reason why Ben ran amok. Ben the Slaughterer. He had another name besides being a human butcher. Lunatic Warrior. Just like the name, he would become a crazy warrior. Although it stated that it would give a continuous effect while consuming the user's stamina, the user's mind would also be affected. So the user had to be careful when using items with these kinds of effects or skills. Those that had weak willpower would be consumed. Especially since this would only take effect when the user had taken a fatal blow, he had to be even more careful. Didn't Ben the Slaughterer eventually become half crazy after becoming the lunatic warrior? Reversing the tables in one shot. Although he eventually brought his own end through the consumption of stamina, due to his transformation as the lunatic warrior, Myung experienced a life-threatening crisis during his assassination attempt. Even when he was inflicted with tens of fatal wounds, he would try to take Myung down with him until the very end. He considered him invulnerable, and the reason for that was this ring. Myung didn't hesitate as he equipped all three items he had in his hands. Finally, his whole body was filled with strength. His vision became wider and his senses became more sensitive. Burning excitement. He felt like he could do anything. 2 rings left. The lunatic sovereign's ring was necessary for obtaining the S-ranked weapon, Diabolos. And the key to that was made up of 3 rings in total. Horus's Godseat ring and Hamel's rune ring. I will definitely find them. He knew where the other 2 were. Although it would take some time, he planned to take both rings for himself. To see the changes in his abilities, Myung turned his status viewer. Achievement effect Agremeris Anguish, A, +3 to all abilities. Class effect A Death Lord, Lord Class, Ruler of Death. Stats A. Strength 64, 38 + 26, Agility 59, 41 + 18. Stamina 66, 38 plus 28, Intelligence 35, 17 plus 18. Wisdom 35, 17 plus 18, Fighting Aura 40, 22 plus 18. Magic Resistance 28, 10 plus 18. Special note, Fighting Aura has been awakened. Equipped and invoked equipment, Anguish, Strength plus 5, Herculean Strength Leather Armor, Strength plus 3, Lunatic Sovereign's Set, all stats plus 15, Stamina plus 10. These were not the stats a beginner with less than a month of experience at the temple could possess. No matter how quickly your stats increased, most would have to train for 1 or 2 years to be able to barely reach this threshold. Although it had a lot to do with his equipment, nothing was achievable without effort. His equipment could definitely be considered as Myung's strength. Hyung Neem. You've come out. He saw many people near the temple entrance. Including Kim Tae-won, Kong Baeksu, and B. Suzy, about 15 people were grouped together. They were a mess as if they had just finished hunting in the forest. It was because they had captured a boar and collected a few different kinds of medicinal herbs. You look awful. Hyung Neem became more stylish. Tae-won admired after approaching and glancing at Myung's outfit. The equipment from the Lunatic Sovereign were all blood red. Especially the helmet, which would cover his face and had wing-like ornaments on either side, would catch people's attention. I have to make them into talismans and use them when I need them. When they go through the gates, there was nothing good in catching people's attention when they arrive at a great city in the underworld. Although it was a huge event with the arrival of tens of thousands of people, the Lunatic Sovereign's set had an especially eye-catching color and shape. To find the one who entered the Hall of Fame, there will be guilds and clans intensely looking for me. It was an obvious sequence of events. It wasn't like Myung only broke 1 or 2 records in Solomon's Hall of Fame. If he was to wear the Lunatic Sovereign's equipment, it was inevitable that he would place at the top of the list of suspects. Myung silently looked at the people around him. I guess I have to use a camouflage tactic. He would conceal himself and draw attention to the others. Myung nodded his head and said, I have something to tell you all. Sizzle sizzle. The captured boar was placed above a campfire and roasted with some herbs. Once people gathered around him, Myung started to talk. In 2 days, a door will open. Baeksu became surprised as he asked. A door? Why will that door lead us back to our old world? No. It will lead us to a much more hellish place. Sorry? Then can't we choose not to enter? Do you know the reason why there are a set amount of monsters that enter the temple every day? I don't know. It's because there is an invisible barrier. And in 2 days, that barrier will dissipate. There will be thousands of monsters frequenting the temple every day. If that was the case, no one would be able to resist. There was no other choice, but to enter the gates. Everyone's eyes were filled with shock. No one had heard of this until now. Since he never felt the need to tell them, Myung hadn't told them until now. When you go through the gates, you will meet a countless number of people. It's better if you think of everyone you meet as your enemy. As the weak will be hunted immediately. Every month, at most tens of thousands of people would pass through the gates. However, the population of the underworld was limited. In such an infertile land, there was no way to sustain everyone. It inevitably led to pruning. Although there were people who thought to just leave it as it was, the influential monsters wished that all cases were under their control. That was the reason why they accepted the necessary and threw out the rest. Although the situation wasn't funny, the underworld was made up of this extreme environment. If you don't want to die, follow me. We'll gather equipment in the forest. He determined that if the average level of equipment was to rise, his existence would be slightly more hidden and that there could be other uses as well. After all, they would end up moving in groups once they passed through the gates. Although Myung could display the strength of several groups, he would gain too much attention. Myung was planning to display an adequate amount of strength before escaping the great city. Didn't you say that the door would open in 2 days? I don't know if we will have enough time. This time, it was T1 who asked. Myung nodded his head. Suitable equipment was scattered in the forest. With the hunting map, there was no need to worry about getting lost, and low-ranked monsters were no longer Myung's match. Also, everyone else had developed to a state where they were able to hunt. 2 days are enough. Myung coolly answered. 2 days were more than enough. If they moved like he did with Merlin and hunted non-stop without even a second of rest, they would be able to equip everyone with suitable equipment. Hunting for only 2 days was as simple as breathing to Myung. On the other hand, it was going to be a hellish march for everyone else. We will follow you. The title of the group leader was passed from T1 to Myung. It was because they had recognized through past experiences that it was best to listen to Myung when it came to survival. Chapter 27, Underworld, 2. TL by Yoni. Edited by Yoni and Mayanai. Sponsored by Nightangel 191. Ha, ha, ha. This is crazy. They finally realized something was wrong after a whole day had passed. They continued on their forced march, reducing the time to eat, rest and even piss. On the other hand, Myung didn't show any apparent change. Like always, he had the same expressionless look as he engaged himself in the fight. Monster. There really wasn't a need for a different word. But, it wasn't like they could stop. Everyone knew that he wasn't the type to help others who fell behind. Being left alone in the forest meant death. Those that valued their own lives would follow Myung and hold their dissatisfaction inside. Here it is. Myung was able to find different items in caves and forests as if he was drawn to them like a magnet. He acted as if he knew the locations of where everything was. Myung really did know the locations of items, but people, including T1, just looked at him with amazement. As time passed, one by one, people started to get geared. The territory of Jumbo Antlion's pits. This was the location where Myung and his group were currently at. Although they would die if they accidentally stumbled and fell into the Antlion's pits, Myung could sense their presence underneath the sand pit. They were able to walk the path where Jumbo Antlions weren't present and take what they came here for. Myung nodded as he looked at the equipment stored in talismans. Horn helmet and chain armor. C-rank equipment. It was too heavy and too low-ranking of an item for Myung to use. But, compared to the regular items they could earn in the temple, they were quite decent. You can use it. Whoosh. As Myung threw the items, a well-built man who was nearby caught it. Myung turned around. He tried to use his knowledge to the best of his abilities. However, even Myung couldn't know everything. Although he could remember the overall picture, he couldn't remember all the fine details of where trivial equipment was located. That was why Myung decided to go around the whole place. The forest wasn't as large as it seemed to be. It was because the topography changed every midnight that it seemed large, but if you just knew the way, you could go around the whole forest in 5 days. Of course, it was too much to go all the way around the forest with only a day remaining. However, if they followed a decent path, he could gear up 15 people with the bits of information he had. You could earn an information distortion talisman by killing the most diverse number of species. Also, he had another intention. It was one of the methods he thought of when he was trying to think of a way to roam around the underworld. Information distortion talisman. There were some people in the underworld who specialized in finding out information of others. Even if Myung tried to hide his identity, they could read his information just by looking at him. He realized that if he avoided their eyes, he could gain more time and thought that the information distortion talisman was the way to go. The information distortion talisman was a type of trick item, where only the information Myung set beforehand would be readable. Since it was very rare, not many people knew of this item. It was common sense that it would be impossible for a beginner to possess such an item. They weren't able to openly show that they were looking for him. There were people who would try to find him. However, all the guilds and clans all kept each other in check. If a large group showed signs that they were trying to find Muyang, even if they didn't know the reason, other groups would hold them back. The underworld was that kind of place. There were many who couldn't bear to see others do well. It was obvious that they could only move secretly in a small group, and it would be most effective if they used individuals who had abilities in information gathering. As they could find out just by looking. They would try to find out who no name was among the strong. The information distortion talisman was his hidden card to avoid their eyes. On top of that, he would increase others' appeals so that they get more confused. Muyang was aiming to buy more time than to deceive others. He didn't think he could completely deceive everyone. What Muyang wanted was to just buy enough time to get what he wanted and leave the great city while they wasted their time looking for him. I need to enter the Sky Library. Sky Library. It was the place with plentiful amounts of knowledge. The place where beginners could gain knowledge after they arrived in the underworld. Nowadays, the meaning had changed, but either way, because of its importance, it was within bounds to say that the great city was built on the site where the Sky Library was located. However, there was a daily limit on the number of people who could enter the library. That was why, for beginners, they needed to have a good score from the pruning trial. Eye of the Sky. It was the name of the skill that could greatly help Muyang as he moved forward. Its value was incomparable to a generic skill in information gathering. The Eye of the Sky helped the user read and know all the knowledge that existed in the Sky Library. Of course, it could only be earned in the Sky Library. I need to move right away. Ah! Everyone started to move as they grabbed hold of their legs that felt like they were going to break. Shush! Muyang quietly moved his index finger to the tip of his nose. Then, everyone held their breath and looked towards the front. A giant Leo was sitting on top of a rock, enjoying his nap. He left his group since he was too old. His age could be estimated by the color and thickness of his mane. Normally, giant Leos lived as a group. However, when they aged, they usually left their group to live alone. Of course, Muyang couldn't disregard him. Giant Leo was the king of the forest. The one on the very top of the food chain, the monster who ate up the other monsters in the forest. From the second boss fight, one could know how much of a diabolical monster it was when even the Shambas hesitated because of his scent. I could do it alone. However, he was no match for Muyang in his current state. He concluded that he could easily hunt the beast using the lunatic sovereign set and the undead. However, Muyang wasn't planning on approaching him first. A way of fighting against a strong opponent. Normally, they had to learn this by taking part in the boss battles, but didn't Muyang always finish them by himself? Because of this, they never really learned to fight against a strong opponent. Muyang lightly tapped Tiwan's shoulders and pointed toward the giant Leo. And then, quietly spoke. For him to go first. Gulp. Tiwan nervously grabbed hold of his shield of eradication. Then, Muyang gestured the rest to spread apart. By following his gestures, everyone started to move and eventually, the hunt began. Gaya! Tiwan got the Leo's attention by screaming. Gruel! The giant Leo, who was woken from a nap, let out a horrible roar and jumped down from the rock. The rest of the close-range soldiers waited for an opportunity as they closed in from behind. Scream from every direction. Giant Leos had large territories. Since he already figured out that he was not in a group, but alone, there was no need to worry. Soon, by Muyang's orders, everyone started to scream. Gah! Heha! Hua! Growl! As if he was unable to think straight, he let out another loud roar. Don't stop! People were taken back by his vigor, but Muyang kept inciting them to continue. If they were intimidated by just one monster, they couldn't survive the underworld. Of course, the first to move was Tiwan. However, the one that moved right after him was Suzy. Suzy was holding the sword and shield of Dawn. There was no need for her to join the rest to find equipment because her secret class was good. But, she decided to join the others for her own development. Not bad. The splendors of the secret class were certainly being revealed. She has passed the level where she could be disregarded for being young. Overall, in terms of fighting power, she was better than the average adult. If she gained more experience and became a bit harsher, a great soldier would be born. Damn it! Tiwan swore. It was because his nape was injured by the giant Leo's claws. However, he calmly defended his place. Thanks to him, other people were able to attack the Leo much easier. Ha! Gasp! Stupid monster! Ha! And after 20 minutes of a long fight, they were able to succeed in killing the giant Leo. When everyone thought that the hunt was over, they all sat down where they were standing. As their minds and bodies were relaxing. Grr! The giant Leo, who everyone thought was dead, targeted and jumped towards Tiwan's back. Tiwan also felt him approaching, but didn't have any time to react. Was he just going to die like this? Tiwan tightly closed his eyes. Then... stab! Muyong spoke along with the sound of something being stabbed. An old giant Leo is skilled. They even know how to play dead. Afterwards, he pulled out the dagger which pierced through the middle of the giant Leo's forehead. Thank you. Just because a fight has ended, it doesn't mean that that's the end. Don't relax until the very end. I'll bear that in mind. Tiwan nodded heavily. Although they made the mistake of loosening up at the end, but it wasn't bad overall. If it was 2 days ago, this would have been impossible. They were able to hunt the giant Leo without much difficulty because they had all geared up. They should be able to get a good result from the pruning trial. It seemed like he would be able to climb the sky library. They were stronger than the average beginner. Finally, messages appeared in the air. Kim Ahin, the monster scholar. There was no need to say anything about Lucien, but a new name appeared from the temple. However, Muyong was well aware of this woman. It was only through the assassination of Ahin that he was able to obtain information about the information distortion talisman. She was a strange woman who studied monsters and wanted to find a way to be on friendly terms with them. Without a hesitation, Muyong chose the camouflage talisman. On the spot, Muyong used the yellow talisman that appeared on top of his hand. Lunatic Sovereign's set could just be made into a talisman and placed inside the infinity pouch. Then, if he disguised the infinity pouch, no one would notice. All that was left was resetting his stats. Not too strong, but not too weak. As he rubbed his chin, he inputted reasonable numbers. After all, it was only a disguise. Muyong didn't actually become any weaker. Muyong nodded after he verified the short message. The preparations were finished. He couldn't be 100% certain, but it was enough to buy him some time. It wasn't like any of the people around him knew exactly what Muyong did or what he had earned. Besides that, he was planning on taking further measures. For the rest, he thought to take care of them when the opportunity arises. He didn't really worry too much. Even if an unlikely situation occurred, there were still many ways to escape. By using the Hell Horse, or the long-distance teleportation magical item, he could avert a crisis. After collecting the equipment from the giant Leo's territory, Muyong spoke. Let's return. Chapter 28, Underworld, End. TL by Mayanai. Edited by Mayanai and Yoni. Within the group of 15 people, only 3 actually understood Muyong. Kim Ti-wan, B. Suzy, and Kong Biksu. They were the ones who completed the trials of the Star of David and the ones who were with him in the front lines during boss battles. That was why they knew more about Muyong than others, even though that was only the tip of the iceberg. However, it was better to set up a small safeguard. If someone took extreme measures to find information on him, it wasn't impossible to expose Muyong's identity early. He didn't need a lot. Muyong decided to do one last thing. The subconscious. The subconscious was something that influenced a person's actions. Something that the person himself couldn't notice. It was the territory of the mind that even one's consciousness couldn't approach. The subconscious was something that would stay dormant until triggered by a specific action or thought. Then it would manifest in one's consciousness. The chief of the Forest of Death, Wang Chunlin, used his strange skills and the subconscious of his victims to brainwash them into members of the Forest of Death. He made them into puppets who didn't fear death and skillfully erased his presence from their minds. Because of this, Wang Chunlin lived only as a shadow that no one was aware of. This was the decisive reason why no one knew the true identity of Wang Chunlin besides Muyong. As Wang Chunlin used vicious methods that would even erase one's consciousness, Muyong would have lived the remainder of his life as a puppet if he didn't break through the limit. To preserve his disappearing self, Muyong instinctively read the history of his target's status viewers, which helped him build up his mental defense. Only because of these countless stories slowly bringing his subconscious back out was he able to break free from the brainwashing and annihilate the Forest of Death. Didn't stories play an important role in the art of death skill as well? Perhaps, even getting the Death Lord class was unavoidable. Anyways, Wang Chunlin used countless methods to erase the consciousness of his greatest assassin, Muyong, and through this, Muyong was able to understand his methods little by little. I think it's possible to execute the second stage at most. Methods of manipulating the subconscious were divided into 3 general stages. First stage. Manipulate the surface layer of one's conscious to control their actions. Second stage. Make a special action trigger a single idea that will change their conscious. Third stage. Increase the boundaries of their unconsciousness and erode their mind. Wang Chunlin was able to freely use any of the 3 stages to manipulate one's subconscious. Muyong thought it was possible to execute up to the second stage. Up to the second stage was still considered relatively easy. It wasn't impossible to make someone not reveal information about him or avoid certain situations when they see a specific action. On top of that, it could also strengthen their mental defense in preparation for unlikely situations. It is the only way to escape from Wang Chunglin's evil influence. Although it wasn't a method he particularly liked, it was the most optimal one. It would be helpful to Muyong and it wasn't bad for everyone else as well. Wang Chunlin was a master of manipulating minds. It might be of help when they experience even the slightest touch of his evil influence. If they were strong with high intelligence, this would be useless. However, as they were weak, it was only obvious they had to prepare beforehand. My real enemies are the demon gods that changed this world. Muyong didn't forget his original objective. Although the hatred for the Forest of Death ran deep, Muyong placed the demon gods as the root cause. He believed that the world changed because there were demon gods that wanted to annihilate humans and that their deaths would be his final objective in living a meaningful life. He regarded himself as a hero that wasn't a hero because he wanted to remove all the obstacles in his path. Even if he was someone who was called a hero in the past. If they didn't obstruct his way, he wouldn't go out of his way to disturb them either. However, there was no reason not to move obstacles that were in his way. That was why he didn't hold getting his identity exposed in any regard. It was enough if he could gain sufficient time to enter the Sky Library. Muyong fundamentally acted alone. This wouldn't change in the future. If there were other heroes that wanted to kill the demon gods, he could provide some help, but would never join them. Muyong was Muyong and they were them. As their methods were different, it was best not to bother each other. Also, didn't he personally witness human gatherings collapse frivolously? This was the reason why Muyong resolved himself to obtain everything himself. On top of that, the underworld was a place where the strong were able to defeat the masses. He would become a true superhuman and annihilate his enemies. I guess I have to get started. There wasn't much time until the gates would open. Hehe, is it tasty? Muyong and Suzy were sitting together. Suzy was playing around with the Emperor of Shroom Mice, King King, with her fingers. She giggled as she watched King King chewing on a bean with gusto. Tiwan, Baixu, and everyone else would be nervous when facing Muyong. However, Suzy was different from everyone and wasn't nervous at all. It was probably due to her good senses that she realized Muyong didn't really have any bad intentions. She followed Muyong based her instincts. The best type for burrowing into one's subconscious. Manipulating one's subconscious wasn't something that could be done to anyone. That was if you weren't at Wang Chenglin's level. First, there must be some trust and confidence towards the manipulator. It had to be to the point where if one was to claim that a regular stone was gold, the other would say, it really could be gold. You're enduring better than I thought. Really? I always think I'm constantly making mistakes. Everyone makes those mistakes. The moment was approaching. The most important thing to do first was to get the target to open up their heart. Although Wang Chenglin would use hallucinations, the side effects were too strong. Also, there weren't any lies in Muyong's words. It was possible because Suzy's adaptability was outstanding. It might even be easier for her to comply because she was so young. Also, her basic fighting strength was better than most adults. A surprising level for her age. It was definitely worth paying attention to her future growth. Then that's a relief, hee. Suzy smiled brightly. Her smile seemed to be more relaxed than before. Do you remember my warnings? Don't show your watch to others, don't try to show off until you have indisputable strength, and if you are going to do something, put all your effort into it. Although they were passing words, she had fortunately remembered them all. As soon as Muyong nodded his head, Suzy clapped her hands and held out her status viewer. Right. I got a word skill. I read the description, but the words were too difficult and I couldn't understand it. Did she forget the words she just said? It didn't seem that way. It felt like she just didn't consider Muyong as an other. Muyong clicked his tongue as he accepted her status viewer and examined it. Achievement effect none. Class effect Valkyrie of Dawn, secret, there will be light after hardships. Strength 30, agility 30. Stamina 30, intelligence 30, wisdom 30. Special note, none. Skill name, Sword of Dawn, D. Description: summon the Sword of Dawn. Skill name, Shield of Dawn, D. Description: summon the Shield of Dawn. Skill name, Suffering and Hardship, D. Description: soft on the outside, but strong and firm on the inside. 1. You cannot gain any stats from skills or equipment. However, all basic stats will rise quickly. It's a good skill. Like he expected, it seemed like the Valkyrie of Dawn was a class that raised all stats equally. However, Muyong admired her last skill. It could be considered the best skill for those who didn't have the ability to find outstanding equipment like Muyong. Unfortunately, since this skill wouldn't be able to increase her stats limitlessly and due to the increasing importance of good equipment later on, he wondered how this class would overcome these limitations, as it would be the determining factor of who was strong and who was weak. Muyong handed back her watch and told her what the word meant. It just means as long as you try hard, you will continuously get stronger. Then I can be of more help in the future. Did you hear that, King? You have to look up to me. Suzy yawned as she rubbed King's chin. But why am I suddenly sleepy? Looking at her hazy, partly opened eyes, Muyong decided that this was the moment. The faint sleeping scent he had released had finally taken effect. Look at my finger. Okay. After getting her to concentrate on his right index finger, he gently pressed it in the middle of her forehead. It would serve as the link to her consciousness. Concentrate. You have to put all your consciousness into this finger. This wasn't something that would bring forth a large change. The best Muyong could do was take out her consciousness and plant 2 commands in her subconscious which resided deep in her mind. One was to not expose Muyong and the other was to prepare for the unlikely situation by increasing her mental defense. As Suzy nodded her head with a dazed expression, Muyong continued on with his work. Rumble. The ground was shaking. Countless shooting stars were falling from the sky. A strong wind blew as a gate opened in the middle of the temple. Let's go. Muyong walked ahead. The rest followed behind with very nervous expressions. Once they passed through the gates, a wave of slight dizziness fell on them. Muyong held his forehead as the black surroundings changed and he returned back to reality shortly after. Where is this? Why are there so many people? Commotion erupted all around. Muyong looked around at his surroundings. Around 1,000 people were standing on a vast plain. The pruning has started. It was different from the past. In the past, almost 10,000 people from the 9 guilds and 5 great clans received the beginners, including Muyong. However, this time, they were dropped on the trial grounds with no explanation. What was more was seeing how there were only 1,000 people. It seemed like they were divided into separate groups. As he waited, fortunately, information about the trial appeared on his status viewer. Judge? He tilted his head as he faced this unfamiliar word, however, shortly after he understood its meaning. I am the judge. You trashy bastards. Blayaz. Maybe he had just turned 15. The boy who was standing in the middle of the crowd, the one who called himself the judge, had large flames surrounding his whole body. He wore a shiny helmet adorned with fire dragon and held an enormous spear in his hand. Glittering equipment that was at least A-ranked. He must be the direct descendant of the Fire Dragon clan. His face was one that Muyong remembered seeing in his memories. Generally, guilds were founded by Westerners while clans were founded by Chinese and other Asians. If they excluded some traditional traits in the name, there weren't any real differences between a guild and a clan. Although the Fire Dragon clan wasn't one of the 5 great clans, they were a large group that received the same treatment as them. Were the judges just the rising talents of various groups? Muyong smirked. Now that he thought about it, it seemed like each group sent their rising talents into the trial to show off their strength while pruning the beginners. My name is Fire Dragon Wu. If you don't want to die, kill me. Or else, all of you will die by my hands. Blah-tse. A coarse flame rose out of Fire Dragon Wu's spear. This was the symbol of wealth and power of an establishment that had built themselves for tens of years in the underworld. This was the roar of a young monster who was raised by spending an eye-popping amount of treasures. This word was in Hanja, Chinese characters, so it was hard for Suzy to understand it. Chapter 29, Free for All, 1. TL by Yoni. Edited by Yoni and Mayanai. Sponsored by Anonymous. Muyong could easily tell who the other 4 judges were. At the same time, he figured out the location of where they may be. Vast plains. Although there were the sky and the sun, this wasn't the underworld. Muyong noticed that the atmosphere and the concentration of magic power were completely different from the underworld. Box of Trials. The Box of Trials was an item that allowed people to set up their own trial and rewards. It would automatically transport people who enter a particular area and it was set up behind the gates so that people who passed through would be forced to enter. By seeing how elaborate the setup was, Muyong could tell that they put in a lot of effort. Those judges. Kids from each group probably entered beforehand. All rising talents were occasionally tested with trials like this. The system wouldn't have given trials to only the newcomers. Clearly, a similar message had to be given to those 5 kids as well. Of course, the situations of those 5 kids and the 1,000 newcomers who gathered here were completely different. It was because the establishments that have dominated the underworld for about 50 years had spent all their mind-boggling treasures to create these 5 people. Especially, due to the nature of clans, the clan heads would have more authority than guild masters. This could lead to a more drastic difference in allocated resources. In fact, the meaning of clans was different from the general term. Clan members would normally be related to each other by blood, however, the clans in the underworld weren't like that. They were tied together with bonds thicker than blood. Even if these bonds had degraded over time, because the bonds still existed, it was possible for those of higher ranking to pool their resources together. Muyong gazed at Fire Dragon Wu. The Fire Dragon clan could not be part of the 5 great clans and were very displeased with that fact. In a few words, they were just a lump of inferiority complex. It was certain that they wanted to take advantage of this chance to prove that they were superior. Unlike Fire Dragon Wu, the other 4 people seemed to be members of the 9 guilds or the 5 great clans. You bastards lower than bugs. Remember. If you stay still, you'll all die. Blaze. As his spear moved, a blazing fire spread around him. Gah! My body, my body! And in an instant, 7 people were burned into ashes. What should he do? Fire Dragon Wu was overwhelming. The little monster was crazily blasting fire everywhere. However, the people who were gathered here all survived a month at a temple. It was unexpected, but they weren't taken back. Let's stick together. Let's beat this kid first and think later. The equipment they were carrying weren't that bad. Of course, it wasn't comparable to the 5 judges, but, if 1,000 newcomers fought together, it was definitely possible. Some people within the group were even willing to risk their lives. Literally, those people realized on their own that they need to fight with their lives on the line. Every person realized themselves that they need to fight with their lives on the line. Although Wu was a direct descendant of the Fire Dragon clan, he was still only in his mid-20s. He couldn't be experienced in fighting against a number this big on his own. He wasn't losing the fight, but he could only be taken back as the majority of the people who he called lower than bugs were grouping up against him. Hyung Nim, shouldn't we join them? Tiwan, who was behind Myung, asked. Myung shook his head. The 4 haven't made their move yet. The 4 judges near Wu. 2 boys, 2 girls. They haven't made their move yet. However, they wouldn't just watch Wu suffer. Even if they didn't really care for him, that didn't mean they would allow people to gossip about how a descendant of a Fire Dragon clan died in the hands of newbies, as this will lower their status as well. It was foolish to fight against the 5 judges when they were all gathered in one place. Why is he showing off? Ah! I don't feel like it. Finally, the rest of the 4 started to make their move. As expected, they weren't going to just sit and watch Wu get attacked. They looked very relaxed as if they were all going on a walk, but as soon as they grabbed hold of their weapons, they turned into yakshas. Thump! Rumble! A transparent sword split someone apart. Some people were burned by a widespread lightning that came out of nowhere, and there was even someone who ran on all 4s like a beast. The people who acted against the judges were killed first. As the center fell apart, the rest could only follow suit. Deserters cropped up one after another. Myung raised one of his hands. Fall back! Even the planes had an end. After walking straight for about 30 minutes, a wall blocked their path. As Myung stretched out his hand to touch the transparent wall, he shook his head. This was probably the limit of the box of trials. Besides those 5, no one else seemed to be different. Myung sat on a nearby rock. He carefully examined the 1,000 people, however, excluding the kids who were judges, no one else looked foreign. Although Myung returned from the past, he still kept his unique sharp senses. It seemed unlikely that someone who could deceive Myung's senses could be in a place like this. It's difficult to target them when the 5 are together. I need to take them on one by one. Like how Wu was in danger by acting by himself, there was a chance if he removed them one by one. Hyung Nim. Are we just going to stay here and wait? Tiwan seemed a bit mad. He didn't seem satisfied in drawing back and not joining forces with the rest. In fact, it wasn't a bad idea to run away until there were 300 people left. Do you think something will change if we join the rest? How do we know if we haven't even tried? The price for recklessness is death. Not just one person, but everyone here will die. Knowing how to be objectively rational was the best way to survive in the underworld. If Tiwan was skilled and strong, things might have been different, but for now, it was nothing more than nonsense. Myung got up from the rock and approached Tiwan. About 100 people died over there, 900 people are scattered. It is realistically difficult to target 900 people with just 5 people. What do you think will happen next? I'm not sure. They will create and release hunting dogs. There will be some who surrender themselves to a more powerful force. The judges weren't stupid. They were young, but they were rational. They would most likely know that it would be much more efficient if they created hunting dogs and released them out to hunt. Myung walked forward. Everyone, including Ji-won, looked at him. Where are you going? This is a safe place. If you stay put, you will last until there are only 300 people left. It was a suitable area as there were many rocks to hide under. Myung thought he did what he had to do by evacuating them to a safe area. If you truly want to win, gather people who have the same goal as you. I will move by myself. Again, the position of the leader was given back to Ji-won. If the description of the trial was a free-for-all fight and if there were only 5 judges, Myung still had a chance. However, to seek that chance, he needed to move alone. Fire Dragon Wu. That lump of inferiority complex wouldn't get along with the other judges. A baby monster who was away from his group. He was the perfect prey for Myung. Myung's eyes sunk in as he walked his path. As Myung said, the judges looked for hunting dogs. They knew that it was realistically hard for the 5 of them to hunt down everyone. I want to end this fast and get out of here. What is he saying, Code? His usual bad habits like always. The 3 carelessly yawned as they had their hands clasped behind their back. The girl called Code gathered up about 20 people and spoke to them as she zapped a corpse nearby. You guys are dogs. You know that as a dog you need to be loyal to your owner, right? Woof, woof. If you listen well, I will specially let you guys live. I will allow you guys to be my pets. Zap. Code shot out circular electric fields from both her hands and embedded them on people's necks. This is a lightning rune. If you guys don't listen, then this will blow up and you will die. Like this. Kaboom! A person's neck and head blew up. It wasn't a corpse. It was a living person. Gasp! People's bodies shivered in fear. In front of them was a real monster, incomparable to the monsters they had faced in the temple. Code smiled coldly. It's not only a bad thing. The lightning rune strengthens your body. So, scatter and step on those bugs. If you don't want to die. Wow, woof, woof. They desperately barked to try and stay alive somehow. Afterwards, these improvised hunting dogs went out to hunt. Behind them, the judges talked as they watched the scene. Where did Wu go? Isn't it too much to ask for him to cooperate? Let's leave Wu for now and increase our number of hunting dogs. It will be fun to watch them dispute and fight against each other. Wu was tracking down a prey by himself. While the other 4 were taking their time, he didn't stop. Stupid bastards! You will be killed for taking it easy. As a descendant of Fire Dragon clan, he had lived his life in constant competition since he was young. To become a core member in the future, he had to endure harsh training and sufferings. To Wu, the 4 looked lousy. There would be no development for those who lived their lives relaxingly as they thought they were strong. He was going to quickly end this trial and prove that he was superior. Just then, when Wu was walking in between dried-up trees. Crack! He stepped on something and numerous of daggers flew towards him. Swish! Da-da-da-da-da-dak! Wu quickly swung his spear and quickly rotated it to block all the daggers. Blaze! As flames fiercely lashed out, all the flying daggers dropped onto the floor. But, that wasn't the end. Graya! The fire dragon on his helmet roared out loud. At the same time, a fire protective shield appeared over his body. It was the protection of the fire dragon which alerted and protected the user when their life was at risk. Instinctively, Wu rotated his spear towards the approaching danger. Ga! But, he could only hinder the swords that approached him from behind and could not block them. His shoulder was cleaved. If it wasn't for the protection of the fire dragon, he would have been seriously injured. You have sharp sense. Also, the protection of the fire dragon. A deep voice. The middle of Wu's forehead shivered slightly. Before he realized, a man was standing behind him. You bastard, what the fuck? The activation of the protection of the fire dragon meant that his life was in danger. His death was confirmed even before the sword touched him. His whole body was covered in goosebumps. His skills in setting up a trap that would immediately aim for his life. He was an expert. He definitely wasn't a beginner that could be found anywhere. However, there was no reply. Eyes layered in darkness. Wu didn't recognize his face. The man was wearing a red helmet, a fluttering red cap, and was just gently holding a sword. Chapter 30, Free for All, 2. Muyong made a trap in the location where most of the people ran towards. He waited quietly at a location where he believed Fire Dragon Wu would pass by. Fully armed. Lunatic Sovereign set. The effect of increasing all stats by 15 and stamina by 10 and becoming a lunatic warrior when close to death. It was better than most A-rank items combined. Information about the lunatic warrior was given below. Lunatic warrior become enraged by the continuous consumption of stamina. 3 random stats will increase by 15. By collecting the full set, there was no consumption of stamina. It meant that he was able to ceaselessly become an enraged lunatic warrior when he received a certain amount of damage. It might have been a perfect fit for Muyong's style. From the beginning, didn't Muyong continue to fight dangerously? If he just pushed himself further to just activate the lunatic warrior, he would be able to grow stronger at a faster rate. Anyhow, Muyong wore the lunatic sovereign set before he made his surprise attack on Wu. Honestly, he thought there was a 50-50 chance. Wu was a second generation, born in the underworld. Since he was young, he had grown up with monsters, unlike the first generation who were summoned into the underworld. It was obvious that Wu was significantly more developed than Muyong's current state when they looked at the overall factors. But, he still considered it a 50-50 chance because he was certain that Wu wouldn't suspect of an ambush attack. But, the protection of Fire Dragon. They are really supporting him. Muyong clicked his tongue knowing how much of a blessing it was to have that item. Descendants really were descendants. The past Muyong also dealt with the Fire Dragon clan. The one who assassinated Fire Dragon In, the clan leader, was Muyong. Even then, it was difficult because the protection of Fire Dragon had been activated. I thought I heard somewhere that it took about a year to make an item with the protection of the Fire Dragon. A blessing that could protect your life once couldn't have been easily obtained. He could tell how much the Fire Dragon clan was supporting Wu by the amount of resources they have given him, even for a trial to kill beginners. Talk. Who sent you? The Blue Dragon clan? Maestro Guild? Wu asked with a stiff face. The tips of Muyong's lips were slightly raised. Of course, it would be hard for Wu to accept that a newbie would be able to injure him since he would also know that the beginners have only lived in a temple for just a month. So you're not going to respond? Fine, you bastard, I won't let you die so easily. Wu rotated his spear. It changed into a different form of a spear as it started blazing with fire. Did you think you could do anything with your mere B-ranked equipment? Most of my skills and equipment are A-ranked. Clash. Muyong made the first move. Muyong tilted anguish and smacked the head of the spear. Wu's body shuddered after sensibly blocking Muyong's attack. He never thought that Muyong would attack him before he finished what he had to say. You talk too much. Muyong put an end to the conversation. The prideful Wu was obviously pissed by Muyong interfering with what he had to say. Die. Even if his skills and equipment were good, all of Wu's movements were within Muyong's assumptions. It couldn't be helped as Wu was too young. If only he was a bit older and could be more rational. After thinking to that point, Muyong secretly laughed. Muyong remembered that Wu still had an inferiority complex even when he took over the Fire Dragon clan when Fire Dragon In died. Blaze! Countless numbers of blazing spears dropped all around. Muyong avoided them all, but still his whole body was covered in soot. Rain of Fire Dragon. It had better range than I thought. Even if Muyong knew most of Wu's skills because of the overall difference in stats and skill rank, he didn't think it would be easy. If he didn't wear the Lunatic Sovereign's set, it would have been difficult. Wu mocked Muyong after casting a few more Rain of Fire Dragon on him. You little squirt! Muyong shrugged as he took out 2 talismans. The Skeleton of Fire and Ice and the Prince and his subjects. Crack! Crack! Skreek! In an instant, the undead appeared and surrounded Wu. Necromancer? Foolish! Do you think undead could survive my blaze? As if it was ridiculous, Wu laughed and attacked with his blazing spear. But, it was completely blocked by the shield produced by the Skeleton of Fire and Ice. Basically, the element of fire was offset by the element of water. The Skeleton of Fire and Ice had both characteristics of fire and ice elements and wasn't bad against Wu's element. Die! Kriok! The Dark Ghoul and 30 other ghouls joined up and followed right away. Showing both these undead meant that Muyong was certainly going to kill him. These half-dead corpses. Wu's face became completely red. He wasn't used to a situation like this where things didn't go his way. The shield created by the skeleton weakened Wu's blazing spear and the Dark Ghoul and his reinforced ghouls persistently harassed Wu. Meanwhile, Muyong moved soundlessly. Free-for-all was the type of fight assassins enjoyed the most. In a fight where people couldn't tell who was who, they liked approach them like a shadow to slit their throats. Slowly. Piercing through their weakness. Muyong was clearly right in front of him, but was outside his sight. Even if Wu had lots of great equipment and skills, he was still young and had little experience. He wouldn't have had time to learn how to face a real assassin. Stab! Gah! He barely avoided a critical injury. However, he was able to precisely deepen the wound he made earlier. As expected, he really does have sharp senses. Wu had outstanding senses in evading death. If Muyong was in his prime, this wouldn't have happened, but still, it was amazing. As the same situation continuously occurred, he couldn't contain his anger and raised his spear high. I will kill you all. The cry of the fire dragon. Zeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeee ground with hellfire. The cry of the fire dragon was a unique skill only the fire dragon clan had. However, that skill was a double-edged sword. It had monstrous destructive power, but didn't allow for the user to be safe. Cover me. Right away, Muyong ordered his undead. The ghouls hurriedly ran toward Muyong and covered his body. Thump. Blaze. Hellfire continued to drop flames onto the ground. The skeleton of fire and ice used its shield, but it was useless. The ghouls were all burnt and Muyong wasn't completely safe. 79, Agility 59-74, and Magic Resist 40-55. Muyong pushed the burnt-up ghouls and came out after the duration of the cry of the fire dragon had ended. With his wrecked body, Wu looked at Muyong. As if he was tired of this. Including the dark ghoul, 6 ghouls were still fine. It was sad, but the skeleton of fire and ice broke apart. Tisk. Muyong clicked his tongue and grabbed hold of anguish. Was it because the lunatic warrior was active? The world seemed to be stained red and he was filled with the will to fight. He didn't feel pain even though he had an unavoidable injury. Want to fight? Want to kill? You bastard! Thump. Muyong moved. Swoosh. Clash. Muyong was like a typhoon. Eek. Wu got scared after seeing how Muyong didn't die, even after pouring out everything he had. It was like the fight had already ended at that moment. Wu was unconscious. His whole body was mangled. It was amazing how he didn't die yet, it was as he planned. Weiyang was barely able to not kill Wu. He had to force himself to withstand the strong murderous intent he had while in the lunatic warrior state. Weiyang's endurance wasn't that weak to give in to such desires. Creating with a living corpse. A living corpse. Weiyang was planning to make Wu into an undead when he was still half alive. It was never done before, but he believed it was worth a try. If he could turn Wu into an undead when he was still half alive, it would be very useful for Weiyang. The box of trials could be tricked. Weiyang had a complete understanding of the weakness of the box of trials. Unlike the normal trials, the box of trials allowed people to set up their own trials and rewards. Of course, they lacked in detail. If Wu, who was a living corpse, killed the other 4 judges, the reward would go to Wu and not Weiyang. Weiyang could then hide his identity and still get the reward. It was like killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Wu was currently still on the boundaries of death. Could he possibly make an undead with Wu in this state? After removing Wu's status viewer from his wrist, Weiyang quickly scanned his history. Nothing much is here. Simply, Wu walked a path that someone else laid out for him and mistakenly believed that he had built up his own path. Like father, like son. He had a complete inferiority complex, only overestimating himself, and didn't realize the reality. This crooked personality was similar to Fire Dragon In. Therefore, there wasn't much he could learn from his history. Inevitably, Weiyang activated his Art of Death skill. Soon a dark aura touched Wu's body. Level, 78. Type, Dark Warrior. Strength 87, 77 plus 10, Agility 85, 75 plus 10, Stamina 88, 78 plus 10. Intelligence 71, 61 plus 10, Wisdom 76, 66 plus 10, Firepower 80, 70 plus 10. Plus Incredible Equipped State, all stats will increase by 10. Plus High Tolerance to Fire. Plus High Tolerance to Light. Plus following skills are available: Rain of Fire, Cry of Fire, and Spear of Fire. Plus able to detect danger. Plus half alive, doesn't rot. Weiyang was quite surprised by the stats of the newly created undead. He knew that the basic stats were going to be better than his. Weiyang would have lost if he couldn't read Wu's movements or know about his skills. But, he was completed without much of a loss compared to when he was alive. Normally, it was rare for the skills or stats to be transferred over when a necromancer made an undead. It was only possible with materials like the Death Knight to make something similar. The Death Knight. A top-ranking undead. It was an entity that had attained death and was simply a powerful knight without a match. However, there was a limit in finding materials like the Death Knight. Maybe they had to be at least a leader of a large guild or clan. If you could make one, you could be fearless against an army of over 10,000. Of course, Wu's material fell short by a lot compared to that. It seemed like it was a result of a high art score and an increased rank in the Art of Death skill. Exploitation of the soul. What was more, a new skill was created. A name he had not heard of before. Just when Weiyang was feeling strange. Swoosh. Wu's injuries were rapidly recovering and his body was slowly raised. A bright light appeared above on top.